Hello, class. To start off, I want to introduce my team. My name is Daniela Gutierrez, and my other teammate is Samuel Sanchez. And today we will be talking about international workforce and staffing. So let's get started, class. Here is an outline about what I'm going to talk to you about today. I will introduce planning, forecasting, and staffing in a global enterprise. We will then describe the process of international workforce forecasting and the challenges involved in planning the international workforce from an MNE. MNE stands for multinational enterprise, and we will be using that abbreviation throughout the PowerPoint. Lastly, we will go over the options that MNEs have available for staffing operations. First, class, I would like to start off by asking y'all what you think international workforce planning and staffing is. I'd like for you to take out a piece of paper and think about what you think international staffing is for you. Pause the video and come up with your own definition and post it on the whiteboard space. After submitting your definition, continue the video to find out what the answer is. I will go ahead and reveal the answer. International workforce planning and staffing is the process of estimating employment needs, recruiting, selecting, and repatriating talent in organizations with operations in different countries. Now that you know the definition, you may be asking yourself, why is it important? Well, class, international workforce planning and staffing is important because having the right talent at the right place, at the right time, and at the right price is an important issue for every enterprise. It can be challenging to staff global enterprises because M&Es are responsible for not only hiring in their home country, but the staffing of all foreign operations, including relocating of employees from one country to the other. In essence, workforce planning is the definition and analysis for what your business needs in terms of experience, knowledge, skills, and quality of the workforce in order for the business to meet its objectives. So class, in this PowerPoint, we will be focusing more on the planning of the international workforce. But included in here is a diagram of the actual process itself. So we will be focusing on the international workforce planning, as you can see on the left side, but it does tie into the recruiting and the international selection and placement, and lastly, the repatriation. So the planning is estimating the employment needs and developing a plan to meet those needs. Once we plan, we can go ahead and start the rest of the process. So what is repatriation? I know I've mentioned this a second time. Repatriation is the return of someone to their own country. Let's talk about the implications of workforce planning and staffing process. In this diagram, you can see the different implications. So we have availability of data, population characteristics, shortages and surpluses, labor mobility, emigration and immigration, brain drain and exporting, And lastly, increasing diversity of labor forces and workforces. So this is just a diagram to show you that they all tie into the international workforce planning, but we will be reviewing each of these in the next slides. First implication we will be talking about is availability of data. On the right-hand side, I do have a little picture. So why is data important? With data, we can use what we gather and we can analyze it. And by analyze it, we can go ahead and create ideas for our business, for our operations. So when I say availability of data, there is a lack of accurate data about labor forces in many countries. What data are we talking about? We're talking about labor force characteristics. So percentage of men and women of working age who work or look for work. We're looking at levels of education and literacy, the availability of skill training, language skills, unemployment rates of country or metropolitan areas within countries. This data is important to assess whether people with the necessary skills and education are available or can be developed in any particular location in the numbers necessary to staff planned or acquired operations. The next implication we will be talking about is shortages and surpluses. For developed economies, aging populations are resulting in labor shortages, with more people retiring than entering the labor force to replace them. In most developing and emerging countries, the issue is their large young labor forces often lack the skill sets that jobs in MNEs require. So how can we overcome this? To overcome this, we can use various hiring options. So we can look into hiring the retired, immigrants, working mothers, or using robots or computers. So it's important for IHRM, so International Human Resource Management, to research labor costs, cultural differences, benefits, legal jurisdiction, how to hire people, and the role government plays in contracts and enforcements in order to overcome any shortages and surpluses. So class, another implication is the increased diversity of labor forces and workforces. With our increased globalization, with our modern technology and global communications on the global market, is that people with the education and skills needed in today's global economy are increasingly available everywhere. So it's making potential employees available from all racial and ethnic origins and nationalities. So with the increased level of employee diversity, global firms must know how to effectively cope with it. Another implication is labor mobility. The world is experiencing migration, both emigration and immigration, on an unprecedented scale. Sometimes this is done voluntarily or force. It can be legal or considered illegal, planned or unplanned, and in all cases, it is creating a mobility of workers in large numbers, causing emigration and MNEs to examine options for developing their global workforces. There are millions of people working outside their countries, either as traditional expatriates. So what expatriates are on an assignment by their employers, or hired to emigrate to fill vacant positions in other countries, We will further discuss the different types of international assignees later in this PowerPoint. The last implication we will be talking about is brain drain and exporting. What is brain drain? It is when educated and skilled citizens leave for jobs, pay in the developed countries. Class, I want you all to put yourself in the perspective of developing countries. You, as a developing country, invest in your citizens by educating and training them. And in return, you want your employees to work for you. But then these rich countries are taking those people away. Class, would you be upset about that? How can we overcome this? An alternative to brain drain is exporting the work and jobs from developing economies to developing countries to subsidiaries, joint ventures, outsourcing, and offshoring. What this means is that firms get top talent from foreign countries in a period and location of labor shortage in their home country and at a lower cost. And for developing countries, they get a hold on to its top talent and get jobs and income from M&E. So class, let's recap on what we have talked about so far. So we learned what international workforce planning and staffing is and why it's important and the implications that come with planning of the workforce. Knowing this, let's talk about what is the role of IHRM to make the process better. Well, class, their role is to facilitate the hiring of competent, high-performing talent that enables sustainable competitive advantage throughout the global market. They will need to determine what education and skills are needed and figuring out where to find that talent and how to recruit it and hire it. And they need to have the ability to match the firm's workforce forecast with the supply of global talent. So let's talk about the international staffing approaches. The staffing for the M&E involves hiring at the local level. So that can be in both the parent country or in all foreign location where the M&E does do business or has operations of any kind. And as well as management of the mobile workforce, that is employees who are hired in one locale and are then relocated for varying times and purposes to other locales. So there's really four approaches to staffing important positions, and we will be going over them in the next couple slides. The first staffing approach we will be talking about is the ethnocentric. And what that means is when M&Es, they tend to just hire from their headquarters country, and they'll go ahead and send employees on international assignments to their subsidiaries. So this staffing approach is really where subsidiaries are managed by staffs from the parent company nationals. And in this approach, the mindset of the management is really what works at home will work here. An example of a company that does this is Japanese firms such as Sony or Hitachi. They have subsidiaries in Thailand, Vietnam, and India that have adopted this system. And a lot of the customers in India and Thailand are Japanese manufacturers. So therefore, an expatriate with Japanese language ability to communicate with the customer's parent company in Japan is pretty much vital. And included on here, you guys can read about the advantages of this approach and the disadvantages, and when this approach is used. The next approach we will be talking about is the geocentric staffing approach. It's when MNEs, they source talent from anywhere in the world, regardless of nationality. So each subsidiary and headquarter are interdependent of each other to make unique contributions based on their competitive advantages. So an example of this company is the Mercedes-Benz. The company sources raw materials around the world from the lowest cost perspective and assembles their car in Germany where the best technology is located. So the strengths of this approach, it's basically able to develop a pool of global executive for deployment throughout the global organization. And included on this chart, you can read over the advantages and disadvantages and when this approach is used. The next approach is the polycentric staffing approach. This approach is when MNEs prefer to use locals from the subsidiary country. So the recruitment is really more focused on hiring locals to fill the position in a host country. And for example, they could advertise on local job boards or create a contract with the local recruiting agency. They really use this approach when they need the skills of locals to conduct the business. So, for example, they want to expand a clientele to a specific country. They'd want to hire local professionals who really know the market and can coordinate the sales operations. And included on this chart, again, it has the advantages, the disadvantages, and when it's used. The regiocentric staffing approach is when MNEs tend to favor using people from a specific region. So it's just the recruitment of hiring or transferring people within just the same region to fill the open position. So for example, we might decide to transfer employees within Scandinavian countries. So if we want to hire someone in Sweden, which is a host country, we would transfer one of our employees from Denmark, a host country in the same region. And including in this chart, some advantages, some disadvantages, and when this approach is used. So class, earlier we were talking about the implications of international workforce planning and staffing, and we were talking about the experiencing the migration and how millions of people working outside their countries are doing so as traditional expatriates or on assignments. So let's go ahead and look more into what expatriates are or international assignees and go over the different types of international assignees. So basically what it is, it's employees who are relocated from a parent company or headquartered to foreign subsidiaries or overseas operation. And generally, these assignments are for about 1 year or less. And we will be talking about the different types of international assignees in the next slides. So let's go ahead, class, and pause this video. And on the virtual whiteboard space, I did put in a question. If you were given the opportunity in your next job to go on an extended foreign assignment, where would you like to go and what type of support programs would you expect and ask for? So go ahead, class, pause this video and go ahead and answer this question. And when you're done, go ahead and proceed. So class, earlier we were talking about the different approaches to staffing internationally, and we did mention some of the assignments when we were going over those approaches. So this is just going into more detail on what they are. The first one is the host country nationals. So what that is employees of the MNEs who work in the foreign subsidiary and are citizens of the country where the foreign subsidiary is located. And on here, on the middle part, you see the advantages of that. And on the right side, we see the disadvantages. So go ahead and go over this yourself. So within the approaches that we were talking about, we were also mentioning the parent country nationals. And what that is are employees of the MNE who are citizens of the country where the MNE's corporate headquarters is located. And on here included is the strengths and the weaknesses for those types of assignees. Class, the last type of international assignee is the third country nationals. So that is when employees of the MNE who are citizens of a country other than the parent country work in one of its foreign subsidiaries. And included on here, it's going to have some strengths and some weaknesses. Class, so again, just to summarize, we did talk about the approaches. We talked about, within the approaches, we talked about the types of international assignees. And now we're going to talk about the purpose behind those assignments. So there are two purposes. One of them includes demand-driven purposes. So that's using international assignments as general managers or directors for subsidiary startups and to roll out new products, for technology transfer, to solve problems, to perform functional tasks such as accounting, sales, and manufacturing, and for organizational control. The learning-driven purposes is management development. It could be of both international business skills and general management skills for both PCNs and HCNs. And the transfer of knowledge and the socialization of locals into corporate culture and values. So class, there are implications for M&Es when making the international staffing choices, and we're just going to go over those implications. So there are responsibilities related to their international employees. It's varying according to the particular form of international employee and their country's operation, the type of foreign operation or firm's face of globalization. There's a need to increase their cross-cultural awareness, knowledge, and skills, their foreign language abilities, and their overall management competencies within this new international setting. Also, potential performance management problems of traditional expatriates the impact of national culture on performance and how it is defined, on standards for performance, on the reviewability of reviewers, etc. And lastly, compensation issues. So class, we are basically going to wrap up, and I did want to have everyone pause this video. Go ahead and go to the whiteboard space. I also included this link on there. If you guys can go ahead and click on the link, and I did create a crossword puzzle activity to where you could go ahead and attempt it and see if you can get it correctly. And on that same page on the bottom is the key. So just avoid trying to look at the key. Try to attempt it first to just kind of test yourself on what you've learned. And then look at the key to see what you got correct. So class, I know that was a lot of information, so just some major key takeaways. So the purpose of international workforce planning is to estimate the employment needs and go ahead and set a course of action to meet those needs. MNEs experience implications when staffing their operations. There are 4 approaches to staffing, including ethnocentric, polycentric, regiocentric, and geocentric. And the role of IHRM in all of this is to do the hiring of competent, high-performing talent, determining education and skills needed, and their ability to match workforce forecast with the supply of global demand. In class, this pretty much concludes our presentation today. I did want to include a slide with questions. If you can please just submit any questions you have in the whiteboard space. And on the whiteboard space, I'm also going to have where I got the resources, which is basically our book. That's where I got all this information. But yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them on the whiteboard space and I will be answering them as I receive them.